whenever I started taking pictures, at first I was happy capturing images and just having them for myself. But then later I started thinking, can I do something bigger with photography? And at the end of the day, the answer is you can always do something bigger than what you're doing right now. You just have to kind of think about it a little bit, plan, and then execute your plan. So one of the pictures that I took on our honeymoon was a picture of a Steller's jay. One day I was scrolling through Backcountry Hunters and Anglers website, and it was used to help promote the Recovering America's Wildlife Act and kind of trying to gain support for that. So I thought, that's perfect. And it's exactly what I was trying to do.
Hello and welcome to the Wild Shutter Podcast. I'm Matthew Gailey coming to you from Western Pennsylvania. It's a foggy, cloudy, drizzly, miserable day that has me thinking, and I'm sure along with my guest, has him thinking too, I'm sure, about the elk rut and maybe not shooting things in the summer. But we'll get into more of that here in just a second. Thank you so much for taking the time out to listen to our podcast or watch it. I highly recommend that you watch our podcast here on YouTube. If you're listening on audio platform, go ahead and listen to that there, but be sure to check back out on YouTube because we're going to be looking at the images of our guest here today, and you're not going to want to miss those. Also, just recently, we started a Facebook group for the podcast. Feel free to do a search on Facebook for the Wild Shutter Podcast and join the group and enjoy the images that are being posted by photographers from all over the world. If you're not a photographer, that's totally fine. Just join up. Take a look and enjoy those images. If you are a photographer, you're more than welcome to join in and post your shots as well. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce my guest today. My guest I've been following on social media for quite a while. His name is Zac Shopene, Shots by Shopes.
Yep.
Did I get it right?
You did. Nailed it.
Okay. So I got it right. And Zac, I kind of feel like there was a thing a while ago that people talked about. I think it was 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. And that just was like, there was a movie and somehow the actors were always connected to Kevin Bacon. Well, that's kind of how Zac and I are a little bit. So Zac, I had the privilege of having his wife as a student in my class, his older sister-in-law, and his brother-in-law. So I know his family well, but I've never had the chance to meet him in person, but I hope we can change that sometime soon here, Zac.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk with me here today.
No, thanks for having me. I've been listening to every episode that you've put out, and you've had some amazing photographers on that take amazing images, and I'm glad that I can be here to kind of talk about some of my pictures and where I'm at with my photography hobby.
Well, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing about some of your images. You take some amazing shots, and you have a real appreciation for wildlife that we're going to get into here during our conversation. But before we get too far, if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in wildlife photography.
All right. Well, yeah, like you said, my name is Zac Shopene. I'm from a small town of Corey, PA, in Erie County. Let's see. Whenever I first picked up a camera, it was my mom's camera because she would take pictures of my brother and I in all of our sporting events. And we have a family camp near Kane, PA. So every once in a while I would take her camera on drives around looking for deer, bears, elk, anything that I could take a picture of. So it kind of started with that. And then in high school, I took a photography class where we got to use film cameras and then go into our dark room and develop our own pictures, which was a very unique experience that not a lot of people get to do nowadays. Fast forward a little bit further, I ended up buying my own camera, which was the Canon PowerShot, I believe, to take pictures of my friends playing soccer and softball in high school. I would still take pictures whenever we went to camp, and I would produce a camp calendar every year starting in 2013. Looking back on some of those, it's nice to see the growth from then to now. And going forward, before I went off to college, I bought the Canon Rebel T3 as my first beginner camera with interchangeable lenses. And while I was in college, I photographed for the Pitt Johnstown softball team. Still doing some wildlife stuff during the summer. And then after I graduated college, I transitioned to more wildlife, specifically focusing on taking hunting pictures. We're a big hunting family and like to spend a lot of our time in the Allegheny National Forest. Then a little while later, as you mentioned, my wife and I got married, and we went on our honeymoon, which was a 2-week adventure through Yellowstone, the Grand Tetons, and the Rocky Mountains, which was amazing. So before that, I convinced her that I needed to get an upgraded model. So I upgraded to the Canon Rebel T7, which I have right now. And I wanted to just capture as many inspiring images as I could out there. And then in January of 2022, that's when I decided to fire up the Shots by Shope's Instagram page. I just wanted to show a bunch of pictures that I took and start kind of building a little bit of a platform for myself. That same month, I bought my first big lens, which was the Sigma 150-600 that I use now. Coincidentally, that same month, 2 days after I got the lens, I came down with COVID, so I had a lot of time to experiment, hanging a bird feeder on our balcony at our apartment, watching a bunch of YouTube videos from Steve Mathis, just learning as much as I could, and then just shooting pictures of birds whenever I was feeling up to it.
So moving forward here, more recent with this longer lens, now you're able to maybe get the shots that you had been dreaming of. And just recently, so you guys have a camp, is it kind of near the Elk area in Pennsylvania?
It's about an hour away from there.
Okay.
We are located just outside of Kane, PA.
Okay. So you were up there at that camp, and you had this incredible experience with a mother bear and her cubs. We'll put the image on the screen for everyone to see. Just a fantastic shot. I'm a bear guy. That's my favorite subject. And whenever I saw this, I was like, oh, man, that's awesome. So right here in our state of Pennsylvania, tell me about how this situation came about.
All right. Well, my wife and I were out at a friend's event and then came back to our camp, and my parents met us there for the afternoon and evening, and we decided to drive around, look for deer like we always have. I was hoping to maybe see a couple fawns that evening, but just going out, driving around, looking at the scenery is enough half the time. So we're on our drive, our normal route that we've been doing since I can remember, and we decided, instead of turning right onto an old well road, we decided it was too early to get back to that section. So we just drove maybe 25 yards further and stopped. And that's when my dad looked out the window and he said, "There's a bear in the road, down this old well road." And I pulled my camera out. Everyone's grabbing binoculars, grabbing their phones. I'm trying to focus in on this bear in the road. And at first, we thought, okay, it's just a single bear. This is a pretty unique experience, regardless. So I started taking a couple pictures, and then I saw one cub pop out on one side of her. And we're all like, oh, there's a cub. And then another cub popped out on the other side. And just seeing two bear cubs with a mom was enough for me. But then the third one popped out from behind her, and I was thinking, there's no way that this could get any better. until the fourth one popped out from behind her. And they started slowly working their way towards us and just stepped into that golden hour lighting that was peeking through the trees just in front of that ATV sign, and stopped there for a couple seconds. I got maybe 3 or 4 pictures of them in that lighting, and then they started coming closer to us. Eventually, she was fine with us around, but then moseyed off to the side of the road. So we waited a couple minutes and thought, all right, we'll give her some time. And then we backed up and drove down the road a little further, where we saw her in an old clear cut look at us. And next thing you know, all 4 cubs were racing each other up a tree. So we decided, all right, it's time to leave you guys alone. Thanks for the experience. And it's definitely one of the more recent and one of my favorite pictures that I've ever taken.
Yeah, I love that light coming through the trees there, just illuminating right where they're at perfectly. You couldn't have drawn it up a whole lot better than that.
Right.
I love watching bear cubs run up a tree, too. It's amazing how those little, I call them Velcro cubs, they just like stick right to the tree, and they're so fast and fearless.
They are.
And so agile to be able to climb the way that they do. It's just fascinating to watch. Yeah. But yeah, I really love that shot. What a great experience, and be able to experience it with your family along with you too. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And I think one other aspect of that picture is that it's on an old gravel road. It has the ATV sign, so it really gives the picture a sense of place.
Yeah. Yeah, they're just crossing through it. Wouldn't it be? I could imagine a Photoshop version of it, bear crossing.
Right.
But yeah, that's anymore. We're kind of in a dangerous time as far as that goes too.
Right.
We don't want to change it that much, but really, really cool shot. So moving on here to another image that you have, a Cabelas deer, you called it. Is that the title of your image?
Yeah, I titled it Cabelas buck.
Cabelas buck, that's right.
Yep.
So why is that?
So that was the first real picture that I had shared by someone on Instagram, other than on stories that are only there for 24 hours. One day I was scrolling through and saw that Cabelas had tagged me in a post, and I logged on and I saw, oh, wait, I just took that picture about 2 weeks ago. But the story behind that buck is our old apartment. We lived basically within an Allegheny County park down here near Pittsburgh. And I was driving around that night, just trying to get some pictures of some fawns. Earlier in the day, I had taken a picture of a fawn with her mom, and it was just a really, really good morning, and I had a good feeling about the evening. So I went back out that evening, and I drove around for about an hour and 15 minutes with absolutely zero luck. So on my way back, I was about maybe 2 or 3 minutes from getting back to the apartment, and I saw an eastern bluebird fly across the road and land on a good perch to my right. So I slowed down and I got my camera ready to pull up and take some pictures of it, and then it flew off, and just as I was about to put my camera down, I looked to my left, and in this opening there was the Cabelas buck and another buck, which was slightly smaller, but still a cool experience and an encounter that lasted maybe a minute.
How many times does that happen where you're shooting something and there's something that you're more excited about that you don't even see?
Right.
But it's a great shot. He's in velvet there, and I love how the background, you were able to get it so dark with the trees back there, so it makes him really illuminated and stand out from the background even more. So yeah, that's an awesome feeling too whenever you're scrolling through social media, and a place like Cabelas, I mean, come on. Right. You're scrolling, wait a minute, that's my picture. Yep. Yeah, that's really neat. Awesome. And then also another image that you shared with us is from Benazet of a bull elk in a field. Tell us all about that.
So our camp is about an hour away, and every time we go there in September, I convince Leah, my wife, that we should probably get up early, go over.
And by early, you mean like we need to wake up by 3 a.m.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. So there's some convincing that needs to take place there. So we have this whole routine now. We get up, we get ready, and then we drive to Ridgeway and stop at Joey's Bakery, where we always get donuts, coffee, and breakfast sandwiches. And we've done this 4 or 5 times now. It's like clockwork. So we stop there, and we start making our way over to Benazet. And there are a couple of different locations that I enjoy going to, but this one in particular, I was trying out really for the first time that morning. So we pulled in, parked our car. There was maybe a group of 5 or 6 people looking out into a field where you could see a cow elk and that year's calf. And everyone was looking at it, and then all of a sudden you heard this bugle come out to the left of us, but no one could see anything because it was still kind of dark. So about 15 minutes later, the light started coming up, and he started working his way towards the cows to check them out. And that's when I grabbed my monopod and camera and started to try and get into a better situation where I could take some encounters and good elk behavior. So I fired off a few shots there and then looked at Leah and said, hey, I know this is great, but maybe we're missing something somewhere else around Winslow Hill area. So we got into the car reluctantly and drove up the hill where a line had already started to form at the gates, and the gates didn't open for another 40 minutes. So we're like, all right, we're going to drive around these cars. And then we encountered another elk that was goring the ground and exhibiting a lot of unique behavior, which was a nice little 30-second clip to encounter. And then I decided, all right, we have to go back. That first elk has to still be in that field. And that was one of my goals this year, was to capture a picture of an elk bugling and catching the bugle fog coming out of its mouth. So we got back, got set up in the right location at the right time, and I was able to capture that image.
Yeah, that's awesome. I debate this all the time. I within myself, you're in a situation, you're photographing something, you're excited about it, but then you start to think, wait a minute, is there something better?
Right.
And you have that internal struggle, what do I do? What do I do? So it seems like you decided, wait, we got to go back to where I was at, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And Benazet has definitely changed a little bit over the years, and I definitely feel like whenever you find something, don't leave it. You got to stay right there where it's at, because there's a very good chance that you may not come across anything else. So just enjoy what you have.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's a beautiful shot. I'm guessing I might know where it's at, but we'll keep that hidden secret here.
Yep.
But it's I believe a favorite spot of mine too that I completely struck out at this year.
Really?
But yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, my elk experiences this year weren't the best, so I'm happy to see that you had some success there.
Yes, for sure.
So Zach, I wanted to ask you. You do a lot of different things with photography here, and one thing that I think is really unique. I'm not. There are some other people that do it, but I feel like you're doing it very, very well here. You run a blog, and how did that come about? Why did you start that? And what has been your experience reaching out to photographers to be a part of the blog?
So I think the main reason I started the blog actually stems from hunting and general storytelling. Every time I would go out into the woods, I would take my field book, or nowadays my phone, and just mark down and write out what I saw in the woods that day. Whether it was, I saw a hermit thrush, and then I go back to camp and I look up what a hermit thrush is. Or I saw 2 deer, one of them was a buck, and they ran this way. So just a general recap of my days in the woods. And I would also have my dad, my brother, and my uncle kind of give me their recaps, so we could make a story of, okay, this was our 2021 hunting season.
That's awesome. So how long have you been doing that?
So we started that in 2020. So
Okay.
we've had a recap every year since then. And I figured with photography, I could do something similar. So I would explain and just basically tell the story of, hey, I took my camera out into the woods today. This is what I saw. This is what, I captured. Throw some pictures at the bottom. Give some of that camera information like shutter speed and focal length and f-stop. And I figured that if I kept doing that, I could somewhat inadvertently teach someone else about photography.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of great aspects to this, and I think that something else that it does is it helps you remember how you photographed that image, what your settings were, because you go on to the next thing and I don't remember what my shutter speed was, or so if things worked out really well, you have that documented in a story format. And I think that it's fantastic too as a historical document there, that your family, your future children, they're going to have that. This is what dad did. This is what my brother did. This is what, to have that document. I think that, we kind of rely on Facebook now for some of that, maybe. But my grandparents didn't have Facebook. My parents don't use Facebook. So to maybe have a written record of some form beyond photography is an awesome thing.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as I'm capturing an image in a moment in time, and I want to memorialize that as a moment in time altogether and paint the whole picture.
Yeah, just another great form of storytelling that Instagram maybe doesn't provide, but this blog provides you to expand further on the story of the image.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Definitely.
So you've reached out to photographers to interview them, find out some of their experiences, kind of like what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And what has been the reception that you've received whenever you reach out to someone?
I would say more times than not, the photographers that I reach out to always have a response for questions and gaining insight and reviewing pictures. But a lot of the reason why I started reaching out to them was to just learn different tips and techniques that I can try and implement out into the field myself, whether it's pre-work and coming up with a shot list that you want to try to accomplish while in the woods, to, all right, you're out in the field, what are you going to do next? And learning more about animal behavior and framing and lighting, and then hopping into the post-processing part. I think just a general learning experience was the main reason I started doing that.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed reading those interviews and just seeing what everybody has to say, because everyone does it a little bit different. And there is no absolute right way to do any of these things.
Right. There's what's the saying? There's a 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And it's everyone has their own style, everyone has their own preferences, but at the end of the day, we're still creating amazing images.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's experimentation too,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to follow a specific format to fit into this genre. And I think that we're seeing more and more artistic things being done, beyond the crazy AI stuff that I have mixed feelings about. And, for me, I kind of feel like I'm shooting something natural. I want to keep my image as natural as I can to what I saw. Now, you might get rid of a branch that's in front of something, or something like that, but I'm not like recreating everything. But I think that we have so many opportunities now with editing, as far as just adjusting shadows and highlights and fixing the color to be a little bit more artistic to how you perceived it to be whenever you were in the field. So we have so many opportunities now that we didn't have even a few years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know just recently I broke down and subscribed for the full version of Lightroom and Photoshop. So before then, I was doing more so of the free version. You don't really have that much to work with. You can adjust some contrast here, put a vignette here, but just having those added tools can help you recreate and actually represent what you saw, even if you didn't capture it 100% with your camera.
Right. Yeah, fantastic time to be living in for those kinds of things, that's for sure.
Yep.
So I was honored that you asked me to answer a couple questions here, and I felt really bad. It took me forever to get back to you with my responses. But one of the questions that you asked me that I struggled with, I'm like, whoa, the question was, what do you make sure that you have with you whenever you leave your car, whenever you're going out to shoot something? And my response was batteries.
Yes.
That's, can't tell you, or even a memory card, but I hope that that's in the camera. But yeah, just always making sure that I have extra batteries, because Murphy's Law, it's going to die right whenever you need it. So you're going to need another one. So how about you? What do you make sure that you have whenever you leave the car?
So I definitely struggled with this one as well.
Gotcha.
I sat back and I was thinking, that's a tough question to answer, because there's so many different things that go into going out into the woods with your camera. And I couldn't just pick one. I picked two just because of different circumstances. And one of them is my, let's see, what is it? My Primos trigger stick monopod, which is originally for hunting, but you can get an adapter to put onto the bottom of your lens or your camera. And I take that out maybe 75% of the time whenever I need something with a little more stabilization. But then the other 25% of the time, I usually take the cotton carrier chest harness for photographing like birds, and it's so much easier to maneuver and carry around when you're out in the woods. That
it's amazing that you said those two things, because after I wrote that, I was thinking about it, and I only recently got a cotton carrier, I don't know, maybe it was in the fall I got it. And I love that thing. I was just talking about it in my last podcast. I love that cotton carrier. My back and shoulders are always hurting and sore, and it's so nice to have that right there on the front. I used to take a backpack with me all the time, and I still do a lot, but to have that camera at the ready right there, it's fantastic.
It is. It's amazing, because then, if you're photographing birds, it's super easy to unhook and get ready to snap off a few shutter clicks.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of my best purchases for photography in the last couple of years, I think. Beyond the camera and the lens itself,
Yeah. Yep.
And a monopod, I use either a monopod or a tripod quite a bit too. Mm-hmm. I just prefer it. I can never get as steady as I would like to be. And especially if you're in a wooded area, you're shooting in low light situations, it's nice to have some form of stabilization. I do have a kind of a heavy duty tripod that I'll carry on my shoulder sometimes, but that can get pretty cumbersome after a while. Yeah. So it just depends on the situation. But so you are shooting on a monopod the majority of the time?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. I was shooting recently a fast-moving subject, and like it was a bird, but it was a super fast-moving tree swallow, And I kept trying to shoot on a tripod, and it finally got to the point where I was like, you know what, this just isn't working. And it was after I took it off the tripod that I actually got the shot that I was looking for. So any favorite species that you have? What do you prefer to shoot?
I love to shoot the Pennsylvania elk. I usually try and get out there during July, August, September, and mostly September. But I was looking through my blog the other day, and I saw that the first adventure post that I had was from Benazet in July, on July 1st, I believe. And coincidentally, I'm going to be in the same area the same weekend. So you know what I'm going to end up doing.
Try to find some velvet bulls, huh?
Yep.
That sounds awesome. One of your recent blogs talked about conservation, and you had a really great discussion about conservation. Could you tell us a little bit about what you wrote, maybe a couple takeaways from that article that you'd be able to share?
Yeah, I can do that. I have it pulled up here. And I think one of the biggest things is that whenever I started taking pictures, at first I was happy capturing images and just having them for myself. But then later I started thinking, can I do something bigger with photography? And at the end of the day, the answer is you can always do something bigger than what you're doing right now. You just have to kind of think about it a little bit, plan, and then execute your plan. So one of the pictures that I took on our honeymoon was a picture of a Steller's jay. And one day I was scrolling through Backcountry Hunters and Anglers website, and it was used to help promote the Recovering America's Wildlife Act and kind of trying to gain support for that. So I thought that's perfect. That works, and it's exactly what I was trying to do. I've done a couple things for the Keystone Elk Country Alliance with their 2024 raffle calendar and their partnership with Straub Brewery with their Oktoberfest label. But I feel like it's only the beginning, and there's a lot more avenues to explore, whether it's globally or locally. With down here we have the Allegheny Land Trust, where we try and volunteer to help remove invasive species and plant pollinator plants. It's just one example of one of the things that we try to do, but there's a lot of areas that you can help, whether it's raise money or bring awareness to, just with carrying a camera around and taking good pictures to represent the area.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Those images can help tell the story and impact people in a way, like just visually, that just words maybe can't. So we're living in a time here where the concrete is being poured all over the place, and these natural places are just evaporating. I was on the highway yesterday, and along the Pennsylvania Turnpike, I can't tell you how many deer on the side of the road I saw, how many raccoons, how many possums, and it's important that we help these creatures because we're all connected. I know that bird life, just in general, populations are down, and birds do so many different things as far as controlling other species, and everything's so connected. And if we're not careful and we keep losing these animals, I don't know what's going to happen to our environment.
Right. I completely agree. I know it's funny that you bring up the turnpike and everything, because for my normal job, I design highways and roadways down here in Pittsburgh, and I'm all for wildlife underpasses and protecting not only the wildlife, but everyone driving on roads.
Right. So I don't know if you heard, I talked to Cassia Rivera, who is doing great things, not building, but working towards awareness for those kinds of crossings for wildlife. Are there any undertakings here in Pennsylvania where some of that might come to fruition? Or is it just, go ahead.
At this point, I think there's a push by like the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership to get wildlife underpasses instituted not only in Pennsylvania, but across, the entire United States. I think they realize that, that to keep our natural resource in wildlife, I think safe is the best or the biggest thing, as well as humans. Like, if we can avoid that animal vehicle conflict, then you're not going to have as many issues when it comes to that.
Yeah, and I mean, like we talked about in that podcast, the insurance companies, I'm sure that they're all for that kind of thing. It's a tough situation because we're all about expanding and building new things, and all of that wildlife needs to go somewhere, and out onto the roads is often where we find things. Trying to get from point A to point B from one natural area to another after we've taken that concrete right through where they live.
Right. And I think it's a big thing. Just studying historic migratory patterns is one place where we can start looking at places where we can implement wildlife, either underpasses or overpasses.
Yeah, that's a great point, to see really where they would be most effective if they were in place.
Yep.
Awesome. So as we start to wrap up here, dream species, dream location. Do you have any trips in the works? What's next?
Oh, that's always another tough question. When we went out for our honeymoon to the Rocky Mountains, we found ourselves in the heart of the elk rut. Everyone else is out there with their giant 600 millimeter 2.8 lenses, and I'm out there trying to handhold a 300 millimeter kit camera. I would love to go back out there, but at the top of the list is probably going to Alaska and Brooks Falls to photograph brown bears and salmon.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. That's where I'm looking for one of these days. It's going to be a little while yet, though.
Right.
Expensive trips.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. And as for this summer, I think spending time in the Allegheny National Forest is going to be the biggest. Spending a couple weekends over in Benezet, and maybe a long weekend in Kentucky photographing whitetails.
Oh, it sounds great. Yeah, awesome. Well, Zac, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us here today. Be sure to check out Shots by Shopes. I said it right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I keep second guessing myself. Shots by Shopes on Instagram, and you're on Facebook too, I believe, right?
Yep, I am
so
now.
So we can find you there, and Zac takes amazing images. Go ahead and give him a follow. You won't be disappointed. And if you haven't had the chance yet, go back and listen to some of the other podcasts that we've done. We've had several guests on here. This is now the 6th episode of the Wild Shutter podcast. We're on audio platforms, but I highly encourage you to listen and watch on YouTube so that you can see Zac's images along with the images of other photographers that we've had on as guests. The podcast on YouTube is just on my account, Matthew Gailey. So if you search for the Wild Shutter podcast, you'll be directed there and you'll be able to watch our shows. So Zac, thank you once again for being a guest here, and we will talk to you again next time.